Clerk, time is 7 p.m. I'm going to call this committee of the whole meeting to order. Oh, I apologize, Mr. Clerk. Reporting out of closed session. I was wondering why you were giving me that funny look. Reporting out of closed session, we have one item, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion reporting out of closed session is to refer the report back to staff.
Thank you. Mover, seconder. Councillor Gilliland, seconder. Councillor Thompson, comments? Court vote.
Court vote has been requested for the only item of council reporting out of closed session. Councillor Gallo, how do you vote? Councillor Gallo votes yes. Councillor Gilliland? Councillor Gilliland votes yes. Councillor Weese? Councillor Weese votes yes. Councillor Kim? Councillor Kim votes yes. Mayor Maracus?
Yes.
Councillor Gartner? Councillor Gartner votes yes. And Councillor Thompson? Councillor Thompson votes yes. Motion carries.
Thank you. A motion to adjourn? Oh, confirming bylaw. In the whole summer. Confirming bylaw. Councillor Gallo, second. Councillor Weese. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Weese. Councillor Kim, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Mr. Clerk, time is 7:01. I'm going to call this committee the whole meeting to order. The town of Aurora acknowledges that the Anishinaabe lands on which we live and work are the traditional and treaty territory of the Chippewas of Eugene Island, as well as many other nations whose presence here continues to this day. As the closest First Nation community to Aurora, we recognize the special relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and as a municipality, we join them in these responsibilities. We further acknowledge that Aurora is part of the treaty lands of the Mississaugas and Chippewas recognized through Treaty Number 13, as well as the Williams Treaties of 1923. Shared understanding of the rich cultural heritage that has existed for centuries and how our collective past brought us to where we are today will help us walk together into a better future. Councillor, can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Councillor Thompson, second. Councillor Gilliland, any comments or questions? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. We have no community presentations. We have one delegation. Christina Choo-Hum, resident, regarding always stop installed at Tamarac and Albery, creating safety hazard. Christina, welcome. You have 5 minutes and the floor is yours.
I want to thank you for having me here tonight and for taking the time over the past couple of months to speak to both myself and my neighbors. It's been really appreciated that you've taken the time, especially over the summer. It's been really great. Next, please. It's just an overview. I know residents were requesting traffic calming measures, and the traffic indicated no need for an always stop. However, there is a need for traffic calming, which totally acknowledge that. We're just looking for perhaps other measures that might actually result in traffic calming for the neighborhood. The sign was installed on July 17th, and there have been sort of issues since that time, which I'll go on to the next slide. So as you can see from this image, there are 2 double wide driveways within the always stop. So what typically happens on a regular basis is that when cars stop, if they stop at the on the left side of the screen, and a car is stopped on the right side of the screen to turn left into either of the driveways. Cars do not believe the cars are turning into those driveways, and they will proceed to start to move forward right when I'm pulling into the driveway. It's a daily occurrence. I will show you a video on the next slide of one such incident, but it actually happens about every day. Next slide. This is the video. And as you see, this isn't something that people are going to sort of learn because it's a very specific intersection. It's a bit different from other intersections you might see anywhere else. It's a very, very wide intersection. And also on the other side of the intersection, and the next slide, actually, you can forward, exiting the driveway as well. This is a case where the car actually doesn't stop, but even when they do stop, which isn't very often, they often stop past where the sign is in the middle of the driveway. And this happens for the other neighbor as well inside the intersection. So it becomes very dangerous, especially for people who don't actually live in these houses, who are turning into these driveways, who aren't as familiar. There are a lot of youth going in and out of these driveways, younger drivers who aren't as familiar with watching for their cars and kind of being cautious with some of these intersections. There hasn't been an improvement since it's been installed in July, unfortunately. I can appreciate that more cars may learn to stop there, but they're not necessarily going to learn that cars are pulling into those driveways, and to be more cautious and actually knowing that cars are actually turning and they're not just kind of fake signaling, that it really is a turn looking in there. Also speaking to some neighbors further down at the northwest corner of Tamarac and the other end of Albery, they have been saying also that it's actually not resulting in traffic calming that they were hoping for. And they're also looking for maybe something that would result in more traffic calming, which I think everyone is sort of aligned with that being the original goal. So just looking to see if there might be a different measure that might provide more safety for this intersection and provide the traffic calming as an alternative. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Councillor, can I get a motion to receive the delegation? Councillor Kim, second Councillor Gardner. Any questions? Councillor Weese.
Yes, I just want to thank you for the delegation. Did you have some communication about the location of where this was going to be put before it was stop signs were put there? Christina, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Christina?
No, unfortunately, what I understand is that there was information that was printed, but only on one side of the street. On the other side of the street, they received information, but my side of the street didn't receive anything.
Councillor?
Okay. I have another question about the intersection, but I'll save that for a bit later. Thank you. That's it for now.
Councillor Gilliland?
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor, to the delegate. As far as like the information, I want to kind of fall back on, say, the original petition with the neighbors in the community. Were you aware that there was a petition going on, or actively that there was something that was seeking within the stop sign at the time?
Christina?
With the need for traffic calming and supportive of traffic calming. They weren't aware that they weren't looking for a stop sign. They were looking for something that more calm traffic, as was I. And I think we're still looking for something to calm traffic that is more effective than this measure might be right now. They actually connected with me earlier and said that they are still seeing the same sorts of traffic concerns that they're having. And this isn't providing the remedy that they were looking for originally.
Councillor?
Thank you. Okay, that's interesting, because our first interactions around council was primarily a stop sign first. So I'm just a little surprised that that wasn't really the first priority that they were looking for, because I was advocating more for speed humps versus the stop sign, almost specifically for the reasons you're saying. So what I'm hearing from you is that you had thought this was more just traffic calming, speed humps or something to that nature versus a stop sign, but yet when they had presented the council, it had come and more as a priority as a stop sign and maybe some traffic calming. So perhaps there was a little bit miscommunication on the street to that effect. Would that be fair assessment?
I believe so, yes. And we did speak recently, and they were still looking for something else to provide more traffic calming and not seeing any results from the sign.
Council?
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. And just one final question. With your recent conversations you've had with this group that has been advocating, do you feel that they're supporting your delegation as far as the safety of the stop sign and you exiting, and perhaps maybe an alternative would be speed humps, and that would be something that the community as a whole there would feel would be more beneficial?
Yeah, Chris was intending to come tonight, but I believe it's the first day of school and he had some activities with his children tonight.
Councillor?
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gardner?
Hi, thank you for coming. I've driven Tamarac so many times and it's very strange. There's really no good place for a stop sign the way the streets are aligned. There's no corners where you have four ways. My purpose, and I've been hearing this for many years, was that the traffic on Tamarac speeds and there's no stop signs. So that was my intent, to get a stop sign. I would like to have a stop sign by the park as well. To get a stop sign in place. And then there's going to be, I don't know what they're called, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ramuno. If you would say what
Bollards?
bollards, those, you know, the plastic bollards, and they're going to be put in. Of course, they can't be there in the winter. I drove it yesterday and I did notice that there's quite a bit of warning. I mean, there's warning quite a bit away, but in that picture you showed us, the car went right over the line. So I don't know what the solution is. I would suggest that we give this a while longer, because we've already got the stop sign in place, and see how it goes, and keep your comments in mind, because, you know, the aim is to try and make the residents happy and safer. And that's all I have to say.
Any other questions? You didn't ask a question, Councillor.
I'll ask a question. Is there anything further that you'd like to say about this?
Christina?
I completely understand how impossible it is to retrofit stop signs, and that it would be hard to anticipate how it would actually play out once you put it in until you put it in. I think this one's really, really challenging, because it's actually this double wide driveway it's a daily hazard. There hasn't been a day that I've pulled into my driveway and not kind of had to really grip my wheel and really have a little bit of nervousness pulling in. I've got teenage drivers pulling in there. It's a bit nerve-wracking for me having guests pull in there. I've got a neighbor with small children there, and he's had a lot of problems as well. The neighbors on both sides. I think all of the neighbors are sort of aligned in the fact that it's actually not resulting in the traffic calming. And I think that's the concern, because we're still seeing the same behaviors on the street. So what is had really good intentions is actually causing a bit more safety hazard than it is.
Thank you for your,
that's all.
through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your feedback. You know, I don't know what's going on with drivers. They're getting very rude and uncaring these days. So hopefully this is going to have some good effect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're all in the same place in wanting the traffic calming. So I think I'm on the same page with you.
Thank you very much for coming forward.
I appreciate the efforts there. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Christina, thank you very much for coming. Council, maybe if when we get to new business, if someone wants to ask staff to come back with a report as far as other locations within the town, because when Christina reached out to me, I did look through Google, and when you do the overview throughout the town, we have many locations that are a three-way stop, but I didn't find any through first glance that where there's two driveways within that three-way stop. So maybe it'd be good to see if staff can provide us with places within the town that actually have a similar circumstance, and do they work? Is it problematic? So those are some of the things that I think that it would be good to get from staff, but I'll leave that in council's hands. Christina, thank you very much for coming to see. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. So we'll move to number 7, which is consent agenda. This is one item. It's the memo from LSRCA. Someone like to move receipt of this? Councillor Thompson, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Weese. Any comments or questions on this one? Councillor Gardner?
Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Thompson. Is there anything going on for the future that we should know about? Like, I found out well in advance about Shepherd's Bush. Is there anything that might be happening that we should be aware of?
Councillor Thompson?
Are you talking about specifically with Lake Simcoe Regional Conservation Authority, or specific to Aurora? I mean, certainly, you know, the Lake Simcoe Regional Conservation Authority is still managing through the legislated changes and the impact that that has, both to their financial situations. But if there's something more specific you'd like, I can always follow up and get you some answers.
Councillor?
Thank you.
Seeing nothing else, all those in favor? Opposed, that carries. Let's see, items, are there any items that anyone wants pulled? Oh, I apologize, we're at the advisory committee meeting minutes. Someone like to move those advisory committee meeting minutes? Councillor Kim, seconder, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Gardner, go ahead. Oh, okay. I just like, cause I see your name up on the screen. That's right. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed, that carries. All right, now, does anyone want anything pulled? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to start with 9.1 and 13.1 and 13.2. I'll pull the 14s as well. 14.1, 14.2. Yeah, I changed my mind.
Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Gallo?
11.1, please.
Okay. Councillor Kim? Okay, anyone else? We only have one left. 10.2 is the only one left. Okay. 9.1. Councillor Gardner, you pulled this. Would you like to move it? Would someone like to move 9.1? Councillor Kim, thank you. Seconder. Councillor Weese, thank you. Councillor Gardner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The reason that I didn't want to move this is with respect to the delegated authority. We just did a blanket delegated authority to the staff. And with respect to the naming of streets, I think that the naming of streets should come to council.
This is not streets.
The naming.
Streets is 14.2.
Oh, I'm on the wrong one.
9.1, naming rights policy.
I'm on the wrong one. I have nothing to say about that.
Thank you. Councillor Kim, go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Mr. Furman for drafting the updated naming rights policy. Names of parks, public facilities, buildings all help shape our community identity and even our values. It helps to build pride in where we work and live, so it's important that we get this policy right. I believe staff did a great job of including most of the core criteria we need to help guide the town in this endeavor. The only area that I would like to bring to people's attention is regarding the obtaining the written permission from the family or next of kin of the person whose name is being displaced. In my view, the item being renamed belongs to the town and its residents. Therefore, it's my belief that the town should not need permission for this. I don't want to get into the whys of the town facility, park, or other being renamed, as there could be a myriad of valid reasons. But the end principle is that this is town property, and as such, the council of the day and the residents have the right to make whatever changes it needs to make without permission of the displaced named person's family or next of kin. I'm open to listening to any valid thoughts to the contrary, but this is my perspective. And if others around council are of the same belief, then I would recommend that staff make this amendment to the draft policy. That's all. Thanks.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I do appreciate staff's work on this and the fact that it is long overdue to get to be revisited, revised, and updated. You know, however, I'm just going to make some comments with respect to it. I still find it's a little too generic. I'd like to see staff listen to the comments of council if there are others as well, and perhaps take another crack at this and bring it back to us. For myself, I find that this policy itself is just identifying just some assets, and why not take a look at combining it into a global or overall naming policy instead of just making this specific to the dedication of municipal assets such as parks and recreational centers. We're building a gym. It's a significant investment, but that gym is not covered under this policy. It's covered under a different policy, but you can argue that that municipal asset from a value perspective is more than we spend on some parks as well. And we have a variety of different policies all associated with naming different assets. I just like a branding guide. I'd rather see it all encompassing into one policy. And I get that maybe there are different processes or criterias for the different components, but I just felt that this one is a little narrow and generic, and I'd like to see it expanded for myself. So that significant assets like pools, arena, and gymnasiums may also be covered under here, so we can understand the process associated with it. Then also within the policy itself, it speaks to naming rights, and it refers to, the granting of rights to the owner, sometimes in exchange for financial consideration, but yet there's not a process outlined within this policy with regards to the naming rights in terms of how is the value determined, the length of interest, is there a public call for interest, or how are we going to manage that? The policy is supposed to provide us with the procedures and process associated with making good decisions, and yet it refers to it, but not necessarily dives into it. And so I still think that there's an opportunity here to provide a little bit more guidance, direction, both for staff as well as councils. I think Councillor Kim brought up a valid point as well. And then in addition, there also doesn't seem to be a process when it comes to termination for whatever reason. If there is an instance where a facility or an asset is named and there needs to be a change, it doesn't really outline what is that process as well. It outlines certain processes, but I think there are still other ones that we should give some consideration to in the development of the policy itself. And those were some of my general comments.
Thank you. Councillor Weese.
One that I had was something that's rather non-specific, which was on page 3 of 4, where we have specific principles and criteria to be considered when considering a name. And maybe that's just leading on what Councillor Thompson said. You've got this word, et cetera, which isn't very specific. So I'd like to know if there's something behind the et cetera, or just delete it, because et cetera has a pretty large bandwidth on it. So it's a question now, but I think it just should be removed, and it should be as specific as possible. That's it.
Thank you. Councillor Gillen.
Thank you. Very interesting comments around the table from council. I do recall bringing other companies forward in 2018 to speak with staff about this exact model of being able to capitalize on municipal assets and dig a little deeper and trying to help offset some of the cost of infrastructure needed for a town. So it's interesting that we're coming full circle and talking about it today. One component that I'd like to see in reflection of the termination, and I don't know if this is written in any of our contracts or in our policy anywhere, is if there is a monetary attribute that is granted towards a naming of such facility or asset, is there language in there, or is it in here rather, that states that any kind of funding or any kind of sponsorship would not be returned if something had happened for character reason, whatever may have happened? Is that kind of language stipulated in there through Mr. Mayor to Ms. McDougall?
Ms. McDougall.
Through Mr. Mayor, I'd actually asked John Furman to come forward, the author. He knows this in and out. I'll be able to point to it exactly where it would be the clause in the policy.
Mr. Furman.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we don't have an example prior to the Stronach naming of the Stronach Center 20 years ago. So I don't have and there wasn't a formal contract at that time. In the recreation facility naming program that we do have an out clause like that within those agreements. But those, as Councillor Thompson pointed out, are under a separate program. They're not part of this policy. But that would be something that we would normally put into a standard agreement.
Councillor.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor and Mr. Furman. So although we're talking about the naming policy, this is just generally about the process of how we would go about finding out, determining what the criteria is for the naming policy for assets. That also would not encompass what the parameters were around them, the expectation of honoring the naming policy as, i.e. character, and whether or not there was a monetary contribution. That's separate.
Mr. Furman.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, some of those details would come into the agreement as opposed to the policy. I mean, we can certainly add things to the policy, but the less generic and more detailed the policy is written, the more difficult it becomes to deal with case by case scenarios. And in sponsorship, almost everything is a case by case scenario. Yeah. There's no two that are alike.
Councillor.
Thank you. I agree with you on that. And I'm just making some generalized statements. So there's an understanding. I think the expectation is there. And I think it's great that we're renewing this policy. As far as what Councillor Kim was suggesting with permissions, I don't know if this is a question for you, Mr. Furman, or clarity from Councillor Kim through Mr. Mayor, Mr. Councillor Kim. Are you suggesting that that as a municipality, we should not have to ask permission from the family? Is that what you were saying? Sorry, I was just a little confused by what you were saying.
Councillor, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Furman, just based on some of that feedback from Councillor Kim, I just don't know what you feel about that. I would be somebody, if I was going to have an asset named after me, I'd certainly want to know about it, especially if somebody had passed and it was, a part of a legacy project. And although it would be great, I certainly know personally that myself and my family would probably want to be notified. And I'm just curious as to your remarks to that feedback.
Mr. Furman.
Mr. Mayor, I think it would be appropriate to notify the family. When putting this together, we looked at a lot of different examples of what's out there. And in further discussion with Councillor Kim, my opinion is that I agree that the town should be in a position where they're asking permission. It's a town asset, but I do believe we should rewording it to say that we would notify the next of kin in that case.
Councillor.
Thank you. And through that language, through Mr. Mayor, Mr. Furman, by suggesting that you're notifying that individual or family of sorts, there's still parameters for that family to come back and say, you know what, that's great. And I'm honored and I'm thrilled and we're flattered, but this is not something we want. Is that something that they are able to do? Much say like when we decide we're going to put a house on a heritage list, we still give them time and a process to come back to say, you know what, this is not for us. We don't want that. Would it act the same way? Would it be the same process?
Mr. Furman.
Couldn't say it'd be the exact same process, but certainly by notifying the next of kin, that would create an awareness for them in advance. And then if there was any reply from them, would certainly be shared with council for council's consideration during the decision-making process.
Council.
Thank you. I'm not sure where this is going to go tonight or at council, if it'll be refer back or whatnot. But if it does, I would like to see some at least process or period that the family has time to respond. If it does turn into a notification, whether it be 30 days or some sort of process in place that's outlined in the policy. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner, second time.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Furman. Mr. Furman, I wasn't going to speak to the renaming, but if our previous councils or the town had decided, excuse me, to name something after a family or person, I think it's really disrespectful to take that away. I mean, excuse me, there would have been a reason for it at the time. I'm assuming it was a good reason to honor somebody. So it says, if it is deemed appropriate to change the name, what would be appropriate? Why would we change a name?
Mr. Furman?
There may be a variety of different examples. That's really not my place to say. That would be a decision of council. The reason it's in the policy is to at least provide some kind of parameters. At any point in time, whether it's in the policy or not, the council of the day always has the authority to make that kind of a change. We don't need a policy, and a policy wouldn't prevent it. So putting it in the policy is intended to at least provide some structure or guidance for council through that process. But council can do that at any point in time. Any council can.
Councillor?
Thank you. I think I'd be pretty offended if I was the family of the involved with the name, but I'm opposed to a developer changing a name. I just don't think that's right. We have a history, we've got the names, there they are, and I don't think money should be able to buy a name. So I'm not happy about that part. But thank you for your work. It looks like it was a lot.
Councillor Gilliland, second time? No? Okay. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Kim, second time?
Thank you. Just to clarify, no one wants to be disrespectful to the named family. As Mr. Furman stated, the family would be amply notified. I don't anticipate that this will happen often, if at all. But I think it's always good to have the option should something come up for a named individual. Like, it can be, I'm not going to give out any examples, but it could be anything that might be abhorrent to society. So you just don't want to be stuck with having no options because it's in our policy after the fact. So it's more just to kind of prepare to have options. It's not to take away, remove any names for no reasons. There would have to be something pretty, horrendous for that to happen. And again, it would be a council discussion. It wouldn't be just an automatic. And just a question through to Mr. Mayor, to the clerk, to have this added or amended, is this something that would be best brought forward in council or something to be deliberated on tonight? It's been a long summer.
Councillor, I would suggest maybe hold off to council. You can pull it again if you want to make amendment. I would work with staff on maybe discussing some of the details that you would like to see, and then maybe even speak to some of your colleagues. And then when we get to council, maybe everyone will have a full understanding of what it is exactly that you want to make the necessary changes.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments or questions? I'll just add that I think I'll reiterate maybe a little bit of what Councillor Kim ended with there, is that at the end of the day, regardless of what's in front of us, any item, it's always council's prerogative to make a decision, the council of the day. Whether we have a policy, we've seen stop signs, we've seen all sorts of stuff. This council, the body sitting here, the elected officials will make a decision one way or the other that they believe is in the best interest of the community. So it's our decision at the end of the day, regardless of what it says in that policy. Obviously, we want to create a policy that works for our community, works in the best interest. But at the end of the day, we make those decisions here. Call vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. 10.1, fence bylaw variance request. Councillor Kim, you pulled this. Did you want to move it? Thank you. Seconder. Councillor Gallo, thank you. Councillor Kim, go ahead.
Well, originally I would have preferred that staff had delegated authority on fence issues not come to council, but this case may have changed my perspective. We have bylaws, let staff be empowered to use the bylaws. But I lost the argument when we last discussed the fencing item last year or so. The argument at that time for bringing fencing issues to council was that there are peculiarities and idiosyncrasies of each case that cannot be simply decided upon by a yes or no bylaw. The bylaw states that there's a smaller height restriction in this case for fences located at the front of the house. And the definition of the front of the house is essentially where the front entrance is located. Often the driveway is located at the front along with the entrance. This bylaw is in place for a couple of reasons. One, to ensure access to the front entrance for emergency responders, and two, so that cars and cyclists can see children playing, as well as bicycles and wheelchairs on the property. Normally, the front entrance and the driveway are on the same side of the street. In essence, the spirit of the bylaw is to ensure safety of the residents. There is no safety issue here. It would behoove us to support the bylaw in the spirit in which it was intended, not to just two-dimensionally interpret the bylaws and implement them just because it is there. What we have here is a corner townhouse unit where the front door is located on one side and the driveway is located on the other. There's a very large front or side yard, depending on how you want to call it, and there's no utility for the homeowner because there's no privacy. The owner is proposing to build a fence, but it will not be closed off. The main entrance can be seen from the other side street and accessible to all. I understand that this will set a precedent, and any change in bylaw or precedent normally does, but in this case, nothing needs to be changed. Council can deal with this on a subjective case-by-case basis as it wanted to the last time we discussed this. If I were the homeowner, I would want to do whatever is necessary so I can maximize the enjoyment of my property. And indeed, the adjacent neighbor signed off on this. And of course, one of them may have signed off because he or she wants to do the same thing. The owner is willing to put in a greater than normal setback to the sidewalk. If we decline this application, essentially what the owner has is a secondary large boulevard that he and she has to maintain with little to no enjoyment value. Usually council gets these fence issues after the owner puts up a fence without a permit, but the owner here has appropriately had much dialogue with the town. I'd be hard pressed to penalize the resident when he is following the process. This may not necessarily be penalizing, but it would be great to reward someone who wants to work with the town. After all, how many times have we had residents or owners cut down trees before getting a permit to get what they want, or putting up a fence before obtaining approval? So look, in the end, bylaws are goalposts to guide everyone. We should not be so inflexible that it is used to hurt the enjoyment and utility that they are supposed to encourage and protect. And I hope some of you feel the same way. And just lastly, staff did not notify the owner that this was being discussed today. And so that's why he is not delegating, but he was advised that he could delegate in council should he so choose. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gallo?
Thank you. I'm not sure who's here to provide some clarity from staff. Is Mr. Ray online?
Yep.
Okay. Just on the pictures, I just want to understand thoroughly what the request is in addition to the additional height. There's an existing fence there. Are they proposing to move? It looks like it's in line with their backyard currently. Are they proposing to move that fence? I don't know what east west is, but closer to their front door and higher on both the front and the side elevation. Do you, Mr. Mayor?
Yep. And I'll get Mr. Ray to but I believe it's they're looking at six meters more closer to the door. But Mr. Ray, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, they're looking to bring the
You're
fence.
on mute.
No sound?
We got no sound.
Can you hear me now?
No, we're still not getting any sound from you, Alex.
Can you hear me now?
No. You want to check your audio settings?
Test.
Yeah, Alex, do you want to try it logging out and logging back in? And we'll just continue. I'll get Councillor Gallo if he's got anything else, and then we'll go from there. But Councillor Gallo, I mean, he can, when Alex comes back on, he can correct me if I'm wrong. They're looking to add 6 meters on that side, essentially side or slash front yard, and increase the height which is only allowed at 1.2 to 1.8, which would is 1.8 is what's allowed for your backyard fencing.
Yeah, so about 23 inches more. The difference between the two. I see the drawing, and I'm assuming the red line and the gate is where they're intending to move it. I really appreciate the fact that they, similar to Councillor Kim, that they've come to us and expressed their views. I appreciate that they didn't go ahead and do it and then ask for forgiveness. I appreciate that they took the effort to go to their neighbors to see what their perspective is. I can understand a precedence. Perhaps the bylaw is wrong versus them trying to do a 6-foot fence. To me, a 6-foot fence is not extraordinarily high, and it's okay in the backyard. And I just don't see an issue with this. Perhaps we can, if there are many examples of this, we can explore whether the 6-foot in the bylaw isn't the right dimension.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, are you able to hear
And
me?
I think there was some examples there of other homes that some that we did allow and some that we didn't allow. So there might be some inconsistency anyway in terms of setting a precedence, but those are generally my thoughts. And I think my question's answered where the fence is going, and I can see it in the red, and where the gate is.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? Councillor Gedlin? We're gonna keep trying. It doesn't look like it's still working. Councillor Gedlin, go ahead.
Thank you. I hear what everybody's saying around the table. I'm really interested in hearing what bylaw has to say before I form any opinion to this. I certainly would not describe our bylaws as goalposts. I think it's a very dangerous thing to say. I do really respect all the hard work that bylaws services in the department does to define their bylaws. It's our guiding document, especially in these situations. I do recall that, we did have people who wanted to have a little bit more barrier with their fence, and it was on a regional road. And I personally, I felt that within our bylaws that perhaps there should have been some lenience in that. But at the time that council was very adamant in pointing to the bylaws, and that's why we have them in place. So picking and choosing when that bylaw is appropriate or not, it's to me a very delicate subject. And we should be very serious when we're trying to concede on these on a case-by-case basis. So, I would like to know if there's examples in town being side yard versus front yard and backyard, and if it makes a difference. At this point, until I hear some of those comments from bylaw, I'm not prepared to go against what is being recommended by staff today. So I would prefer to wait and hear what he has to say. I do think this does set a precedence in town. People do have other alternatives. They could put their fence and adhere to the bylaws and plant some cedars in front and create a little bit more height and privacy. There's other things people can do. I know people on other properties where they adhere to the bylaws. They put a privacy screen fence on the inside. So they've done other things to modify. So I just feel like conceding for maybe one property isn't necessarily fair when other property owners have had to be creative within their parameters. And I think listening to the comments of bylaw is really integral at this time.
Yeah. Alex?
Mr. Mayor, are you able to hear me?
No, it's still not working. Councillors, we might have to deal with this on at council. Doesn't look like technology is working for us. Yeah. Well, we don't have to refer. We can just receive it for now, and then we can deal with it at council. Good. Okay. So we're just going to receive it. So friendly amendment just to receive it. So we're going to take off what was on there and just receive it. Yeah. Good. Good. All right. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. 10.2. So illumination requests the town's flag policy. Councillor Gillian, you pulled this. Would you like to move it? Thank you. Seconder. Councillor Thompson. Go ahead. Councillor Gillian.
Thank you. This one I wanted to pull, and the questions I had about the illumination is really just the people in the neighborhood around town square and the light. I would call it. It could be considered light pollution for people in and around that area. This does invite some celebrations of certainly different cultural events or meanings, so forth, and heritage and culture, which is great. However, the illumination of the light, that's certainly something that could happen 365 days of the year with the amount of special days that we have to celebrate in such a multicultural country such as Canada. So I don't know to what means we will have this facility lit up and what that would cause. Personally, I would prefer to perhaps maybe see this as a pilot to see how that works and get some of the feedback. But through you, Mr. Mayor, I would say it's corporate services. So okay. Did you reach out to the surrounding area? Did you get any feedback from the public on that, since you were really specifically zoning in on the town square for this type of illumination? Was there public consultation that was done, and was any of that taken consideration?
Mr. Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there was no formal public consultation being done in this case. My understanding is that the lights cast their direct or face towards the internal of the square. Is that, am I right? Or is it the full building?
Face down.
Oh, face down. So I guess I didn't think of it being a light pollution problem. Can certainly understand if they're bright enough that it would be, though. So something we can look into before council.
Councillor.
Thank you. So yes, perhaps maybe some public consultation should be had. I don't know what next steps would be. We all like looking at the stars at night and enjoying the darkness that we have, which is not as much as it used to be. And this potentially could be lit 365 days a year with the amount of celebrations that we could have. So I do share some concerns with people in the neighborhood, and perhaps this is something that we should maybe think about.
Thank you, Councillor Weese.
Yes, I agree with that as well. There have already been a few questions about the lighting in the parking lot and adjacent residents. So I think it would be wise for us to talk to them about what type of lighting this is, the lumens, the direction, and all the rest of it, to avoid the questions that will come along. So I agree with that. And just to be clear, this is for town square only. This does not extend to others such as town park area and the band shell or any other facility that we have. We're just focusing here on the ATS. Is that correct through you, Mayor?
Mr. Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that's correct. The new system at Town Square is quite neat in terms of what the capabilities of casting light in the area or on the building, and so it's very much easier to do it there versus any other facility we have in the town. So that's why we're thinking just for Town Square.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Mr. Gardner.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the only request that I've had for illumination is for the town hall to be illuminated on a special occasion. In that case, the town hall isn't in the middle of residential, and I don't think that we have ever illuminated the town hall. My understanding that there was going to be a veil, a metallic veil surrounding part of the theaters, the new performance center, and that there were going to be lights in there that could be changed in color. Is that what we're talking about? Through you, Mr. Mayor, to
Ms.
clerk
McDougall.
or Ms. McDougall?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So correct in both ways. The cantilever lights that we're talking about that would be lit for this purpose are programmable and colored and various hues of color, providing that flexibility. And that was part of our proposal to council back when the project was approved. The variation of color was agreed to for the cantilever lights. As far as the veil and the lighting behind it, it is simply a tone of white that can be dimmed or lessened. It is not colored. And again, that was out of a cost saving measure back at the time of the project description. So the centering it around the square keeps the lighting honed and face down. And that is ultimately where the event center would be. It is programmable in the sense that it would be timed. So at a certain hour, they'd shut off. And certainly for the duration of whatever the request may be. If it's a single day of color, or if it's a 2 or 3 week of color, we could program it however we wish. But it's certainly controlled by us as to, in the town, I mean, as to the permissions and how those lights would go. As far as feedback goes, the comment's correct. This was not consulted, although at the time of the project, cantilever lights was part of the project right from the beginning.
Council.
Through Mr. Mayor, follow up to Ms. McDougall. Did you say that the intensity of the lights could be adjusted?
Which lights are we speaking of?
The cantilever lights?
Through
Mr. Mayor, they are programmable. So from an intensity of hue or color, we can control that.
Councillor.
I would like to see how it looks, actually. Are we planning to do any lighting on one evening for the town square? That might be the best way to get feedback. Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. McDougall.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, at this point, the programming does include a plan to utilize the cantilever lights throughout the town square grand opening, as we intend through special events, whether it is even going so far as Christmas or Halloween. We may even turn and utilize colors throughout any program events that are at that center. So feedback can be received and ultimately decisions can be made at a later date. But at this point, the plan was to utilize this asset that we believe is a valuable asset for our community to create a celebration and tone for an event or a cause that we're trying to support as well in the community.
Councillor.
I'm a little concerned. So the lights.
I'm gonna pull everyone back. We're here discussing policy in regards to adding illumination to the flag policy. We're not talking about whether the lights will be turned on or off.
Okay.
The lights will be on. They're going to either be white, sometimes they'll be colored, and they'll turn off when lights turn off at, I don't know whether it's 10 p.m., 11 p.m. This is about creating a policy of whether we accept people that have requests to color it a certain specific color at a certain specific time, specific day. That's what we're discussing here. So I'm going to pull everyone back. Let's discuss that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd actually like to defer this till we see what the lights look like. And do we know what other municipalities do? I mean, and also we need feedback. Ms. McDougall wants to speak.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I was going to answer the question of what other municipalities do. It does vary. Some will light up a recreation center, some will light up a bridge, some will light up a municipal facility. It varies. And this was an asset that we have and have control over. And therefore it was just recommended, since it's there, it was an easy consideration to add to our programming at that center.
Councillor.
I just think that we should defer this till we see what the lights look like. And I think we need to have a policy for our own use of the lights as well, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Gallo.
Thank you. And when I first read this, I was a little confused, but after listening to everyone and rereading it, I now understand. And thank you for the clarity. This to me is a kind of a housekeeping issue, because unless we're suggesting that the infrastructure that we've paid for and is installed there, we're not going to use it, because that discussion has already happened. We paid for it and it's installed. Unless we open up the discussion whether to use that or not, this to me is simply fixing this policy to allow that infrastructure to be used. And initially I shared the view of let's give it a pilot. What if it does affect the residents? We might have to pull it back, and we could do that anyway. Doesn't have to be a pilot. We can certainly, as council, do that anyway. I suspect when it was initially installed, all of those things were taken into consideration in terms of the impact of the residents around there. Maybe, maybe not, and maybe we'll have something unique here. But I'm willing to give this cleanup really of the bylaw. I think it's appropriate, and let's see how the lights react, and then go from there.
Thank you. Anyone else for the first time? Councillor Gardner, second.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A comment. I'm pretty sure I was at the table for all of the discussions about the town square. And I don't remember us ever discussing how we were going to use these lights. And I think that we really need to do that because we're in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And
Councillor, I'm going to play back again. Talking about policy, not about the use.
there should be first and foremost, there should be a policy about how the town uses the lights. And I would like to defer this because I think it's premature. And I really believe that as a council, we need to respect the rights of our residents, and they're already going to be quite impacted by everything that goes on in the town square. So I think there should be first a policy about our use of the lights. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Councillor Gilliland, second time.
Thank you. I kind of agree with Councillor Gardner. As I understand, Councillor Gallo, what you're suggesting, and I have no problem with elimination for town purposes. For me, reading the policy and approving it as is really made it seem like, okay, this is carte blanche. Now it's at the clerk's discretion to decide whether or not we're going to illuminate the town square, certain colors based on whatever the criteria is, much like raising a flag. And that's kind of the way the policy is set out now. So by approving this policy today, and it's in full force, therefore the clerk could decide arbitrarily that we're going to decide to eliminate this blue and yellow for whatever reason because it was appropriate in lieu of raising a flag. And the question, the concern that I have is the light pollution part, and the fact that, again, you could celebrate something 365 days of the year, probably 2 or 3 things in a day because there's so many things to celebrate. So at what point does that become a nuisance, I guess, as far as light pollution, not the actual event, but a nuisance of the light? So I'm looking at this. Yes, I think it's a great policy, but I would like to see a report back, and at least, after a year, to see how this has fared and whether or not there are any complaints or concern about how often this is being utilized. I certainly, would want to be consulted, especially if I lived directly across the street and this was going on all the time, and yet there was no consideration to maybe how they sit on their front porch and they're looking at this every single day, and perhaps it could be a nuisance. I don't know, but I think we need to be mindful of that. So I would be okay with the housekeeping part of it with the illumination, but I want to see a report back or an update, or a pilot after 1 year, to see how it fares and see if there is any complaints or if we should have any further policy around how often that we illuminate it and so forth. I would be okay with that. But as written, I certainly just don't want to be approving it out of the gate and just allowing the floodgates to open. I would prefer some language in there. And hopefully other colleagues will agree with me on that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Just so everyone has an understanding, regardless of what we do here, the lights are going to turn on at nighttime. They're lights. They're going to turn on. I don't believe anyone wants the entire square to be in darkness when it becomes dark outside. We anticipate we're going to turn on the lights. What we're talking about is creating a policy of whether we want to allow people to put forward a request to say, can you illuminate this certain color for this event? If we don't want to do that, that's fine, but the square is still going to be lit up. That's not going to change whether we approve a policy in regards to this or don't. But we're here to talk about a policy and whether we want to allow that moving forward. Just want to make sure I clarify that. Someone want to do anything? Or am I going to call the vote? Report back. Report back on the policy. Report back on the implementation of the illumination policies. The illumination requests. What do you guys want? It's your request. On what? Did you get that? So allowed. Are we allowing them? So you want to add a clause to what's there. So you're fine with approving it, but you want to add a clause report back in a year's time? That's what you want, Councillor Gillan? Okay. Does someone want to second that? That's to report, basically to approve what the recommendation is, but to add a clause that says to report, staff to report back in a year's time with. Does that work? Okay, seconder, thank you. What's that? Yeah, can we just get it on the screen so that way everyone can just see it? Councillor Gallo? Go ahead.
Just for clarity, if, 3 months in, we have, 10 residents that are saying, hello, this is really bothering me. This doesn't preclude us from reviewing this and saying, okay, maybe we got it wrong. We have to relook at it. We're not going to just simply wait a year if we have those complaints to make a change.
As I stated in that first one, council can bring forward anything at any time. Councillor Gillan, you good? Councillor Gallo, you good? We all know what we're doing? Pardon? We just friendly and we just added it. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. 11.1, asset management funding strategy. Councillor Gallo, you pulled this. Did you want to move this? Thank you. Seconder. Councillor Kim, thank you. Councillor Gallo, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted some clarity on, I guess, clause 3 and 4, and just some clarity around if the concept is, or at least if the suggestion is that we use the hydro reserve funds versus going out to service that $7.5 million debt. We pay for it internally. Have we done any calculations on what currently that $7.5 million is generating in our current investment portfolio versus what the cost of borrowing that 7.5 million is in the marketplace? Through you to
Ms. Wainwright Van Kestel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So this 7.5 million, if we were to issue a debenture, the rates that are calculated here are based off of what we can receive for infrastructure Ontario over 20 years, which is 4.31%. So it's a bit lower than you would see at a regular bank, but it is a rate that would stay the same over the entire 20-year period. If we were to invest the funds, if we were to invest them short-term GIC rates at around 4.8 right now, but those will decrease when interest rates decline, and that's only for a 2-year period. So those will fluctuate with the market as interest rates hopefully start declining even more soon. Our longer term investments, so anything that would be carrying for more than 2 years as part of our joint investment board, the annual return that we're seeing currently on our joint investment board is 6.8%. So it is higher than what we'd receive in than what we'd be paying in interest. The reason this is recommended as part of the strategy is even if we were to go ahead and invest the money and hopefully earn higher returns than what we would be paying on interest, we'd still be foregoing the opportunity to take this $510,000 and put it towards our asset management. And the reason why we see that we're recommending this is because over that 20-year period, that is $10.2 million in capital projects that we'd be able to do related to asset management type projects by using the 7.5 million that we have currently in the hydro reserve. So if we look at how much we could potentially earn, assuming our rate of return from the joint investment board doesn't change, which it will, markets do change, it could go up or down. Over a 20-year period, the difference would be that we could earn about $3.8 million more over 20 years. After the debt is repaid, it would then convert to an asset management contribution if our debt policy remains unchanged, but I'm sure many of us will have retired by that point in time. But the key takeaway is this is an opportunity for us to actually put money towards asset management without doing any further increases to the tax levy. And that we also do have the funds that are there available in the hydro reserve, which are not allocated to any other projects at this time. So even within our 10-year plan.
Councillor?
And through you to Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel, the interest from our investment portfolio goes where?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the interest, what we do is for investment portfolio, we manage as a larger portfolio. It gets divided up based on the different reserves that are contributing to that overall portfolio. So any investment income that is earned by the hydro reserve goes back to the hydro reserve. Same with any of the user rate reserves, it goes back to those, and also along with the development charges and any grants. The tax funded reserves, which include many of our asset management reserves, plus our growth anew and studies and other reserve, we actually hive off part of that to support the operating budget. As you know, there's about 1.6 million allocated in the operating budget, and then the balance goes to the tax funded reserves.
Okay.
Councillor?
Hopefully it's obvious why I'm struggling with this, because we're suggesting that, you know, to borrow 7.5 million at 4.5% and lose a return of 6.8% doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The bigger picture is we're trying to take that 510,000 out of debt financing and move it into asset management. Is there a way of accomplishing both? Not where can we utilize any of the interest revenue off the hydro fund to pay down the debt? I'm trying to find a happy medium here that you know, our net result isn't negative, and making the best decision we can, and it is in this scenario, if you look at the bigger picture.
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So for us to take the difference over that 20-year period, and this assumes that the rate of return that we earn on our long-term investments doesn't change, and it will change from year to year. So we don't know exactly what that is going to be. But we would have about 3.89 million over the 20 years that would come from the net income essentially on here. The challenge is the way the reserve management works is it's going to be the hydro reserve that earns those funds. So those funds are going to get invested back into the hydro reserve and then used for projects that are using that as a funding source. So there are some procedural requirements for using that as funding source, but it can be done. We could look at doing different things with the hydro reserve too. I also looked at this from a little bit of a different perspective, because what we're looking at doing is essentially taking 7.5 million, and that 7.5 million ends up being 10.2 million over 10 or over the 20 years. So because it's the 510 million, or sorry, 510,000 is there every single year. So that 7.5 million that we have in the hydro reserve, by doing this investment, essentially gives us a 1.8% rate of return as well. So it gives us some sort of rate of return. The only other way we could look at doing this and still make these contributions to the asset management reserve would be a tax increase.
Councillor.
So sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, why can we not use the interest of the 7.5 million that's generating 6%, let's say, right now, to offset the 510,000?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, because of the ways that the reserves are structured, the reserves need to earn the interest that they earn. So that means that the interest that's earned by the hydro reserve has to go back into that reserve. Council can use that reserve to pay for asset management projects. The thing is, if we do that, that has to go through a procedural process in accordance with the bylaw that's surrounding the hydro reserve. It's not as simple as just doing a budget allocation, but it would earn the 3.89 over 20 years net. But that would mean that we'd be putting a lot less towards asset management by doing the 510 and using the hydro reserve to fund the project. We'd actually have $10.2 million available for capital over that 20-year period.
Sorry, I'm not entirely clear. The hydro reserve, 7.5 million, is generating, let's say 6.8. If we borrow the money, we'd be paying 4.5%. So we would be generating more than the 510 from the hydro reserve interest. And if it's a question of, a bylaw, I'm sure we can handle that. I just don't see the argument of why we're going out to borrow the money. Why we shouldn't borrow the money and use the interest from the hydro reserve to pay down that debt and still use the 510 towards capital assets.
Mr. Mayor, Van
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the net amount between the borrowing and the investment income that could be earned is $194,600 a year based on current assumptions. So instead of being $510,000 a year available to put into the that's what the net sorry, I lost my train. So basically the difference between the two is the 194. So that means that to get that additional amount up to the 510, we'd still be short. We'd still need some sort of a tax increase to meet our asset management obligation.
Councillor.
Okay, I'll let others speak. I'll do my math quickly in the meantime.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Through you to Mrs. Wainwright Van Kessel. Just to speak to the return on the long term again, I think you quoted the number of 6.8%. But in June, when we had our one investment report, it stated that the long term yield was 2.88%. So I'm just having a challenge reconciling these numbers. What's changed since the June report?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, these are based on annualized returns for the first 6 months of this year. So those reports are attached on the FAC agenda that just came out today.
Okay. So, but again, so I mean, when we look at our 2023 return, we're talking about a 2.88% annual return on our long-term investments. And to your point, while right now things are looking on the upswing and we're generating a higher amount, it's harder to predict over the longer period of time whether that number will stay higher than the rate quoted by infrastructure to borrow the money. It could dip below it as well. And so part of, I guess, your rationale for recommending this fiscal strategy is not just from, I guess, the perspective of funding capital repair and replacement projects going forward, but also it's a little bit more from a certainty perspective and taking out some of the volatility that could be or may not be with regards to market rates. Would that be a fair question?
Mr. Van Kessel.
Through you, Ms. Mayor, yes, this is more of a certain path. So with this situation, we know what the returns would be. We know how much we're contributing overall into the asset management reserve. The challenge is with the investments that we have, the market can change, things can go up and down, and they do go up and down from year to year. Long term, we hope to invest and have more money overall than what we would if we just invested on a short-term basis.
Council.
Because I do agree with Councillor Gallo's assessment that, you know, in the past, when we've looked at borrowing money from infrastructure or elsewhere, when the rates are favorable, where we're generating more money from our investment income than the cost to borrow, absolutely, it makes sense to continue with that strategy. And yet, as you indicated today, based on current results, you know, certainly we're trending upwards this year, and you're still confident that this is the right direction to proceed from a fiscal strategy? Through you to Mrs. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I think it's a good, prudent way to move forward because it does give us some certainty about the asset management contributions that we need. It also, we're in a period right now where interest rates are still fairly high. So we do commit to a long-term debenture. The rates are going to be higher than what they could be in a few years from now. So we know while interest rates are high, typically GSEs and bonds do better, equities don't do quite as well. And then it flips as interest rates go up and down. But the thing is with this, we know where we're going to be. We know that if we do put a debenture with Infrastructure Ontario, that rate is guaranteed for 20 years. But the investment returns we earn are not. They will change.
Council.
Thank you. And I guess in some ways it's similar to the debenture we took for the SARC. When we took that, I think the rates were 4-5% 20 years ago. We're nearing the end now, but regardless of how the economy or interest rates went, that was certainly a fixed rate and it stays the way it is. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Gallo, second.
Just some final thoughts in between now and council. I'll put some more thought to this. In my view, although yes, we take a long-term stance, and if a debenture is 20 years at 4%, fine. But the ultimate goal here is to take that 510,000 and move it from paying interest towards capital asset management. For the next 2 years, really, in terms of from a budget perspective, we haven't projected past this current terms, at least we haven't seen, perhaps staff have, but things can change all the time, and new councils and all kinds of things can change. So from my perspective, sitting here, it's important to understand the next 2 years, and if we follow this strategy, how do we best achieve that goal? And I'm not entirely convinced in the short term that this strategy is achieving that goal, but I will put some more thought into it. And if there are comments in terms of going forward in budgets past 2 years, I'd like to hear that. Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So for the 510,000, if it moves into the budget, it moves into that base amount that we put towards capital contributions. That stays in the budget unless a future council decides to reduce that amount. Given our asset management obligations over the next number of years, and also with the asset management or the infrastructure deficit we have, I can't see a prudent council actually going and reducing those amounts overall. What this tries to achieve over the next 2 years is to try and meet the recommendations that are in the asset management plan, while not increasing the tax levy any further than what was presented in the budget last year. The other piece of this is that we do actually factor this in to our reserve analysis. So as you know, when we do the budget, we show a 10-year picture of the reserve analysis. we're factoring this in, and that helps us determine how much we can spend on capital projects over that 10-year period of time. So if we were to take this 510,000 out, it means we have to remove essentially 5.1 million from that 10-year plan.
Council.
I wasn't suggesting removing it. I was simply suggesting in year 3 from now, is there a different strategy that council might come up with in terms of funding that 510,000, similar to what we're trying to do right now?
Thank you, Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 3 to Mr. Rachel Van Kessel. You mentioned that in higher interest rate environments, equities traditionally don't do well. And I know in the last, 18, 24 months, investment theory has been thrown upside down, where equities have done extremely well versus its fixed income counterpart. And now that we are in a rate cutting regime over the next, multiple years, most pundits would anticipate that equities will continue to do well, albeit there'll be, some rotation here and there from one asset class to another. So my question is, so staff constructs our fiscal strategy, and InvestOne, whom we employ for our actual investment decisions, does staff get any advice from any external advisors or internal advisors in terms of confirming our fiscal strategy? Because in situations like this, it may very well be that the decision is to continue with keeping our long-term investments and using the returns on that investment into financing our asset management plan. So I guess my question is staff getting any other advice other than internal advice regarding the fiscal strategy?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the advice we receive is we have had conversations with our joint investment group that we work with. We also take in consideration the asset management plan. The challenges in this sector, in this particular area, there are a very limited number of people that are experts in this area, because we're trying to balance a lot of different pieces. So this, as you know, like this report is fairly complex, as we're talking about asset management, debt strategy, and a number of other pieces. And it's about balancing those needs overall, which is a very delicate way to do this. So a lot of it is taking pieces of information, but we have to pull it together internally to really look and how we can balance the needs overall, because then we're also looking at future tax levy impacts too.
Councillor.
Thank you. So essentially what you're saying is that the Joint Investment Board is providing some fiscal strategy advice.
Swear, I guess.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, they're providing some advice on some of the long-term investments and what we could receive, but the fiscal strategy itself, they're not experts in that area.
Yes.
Thank you. I don't, I do envy, I don't envy staff because, it's like you said, it is it's not an easy input output decision, and anyone can second guess you. And certainly from a municipal perspective, you do want some certainty, and having that amount going into the asset management plan, you can never go wrong with that. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Thompson, second time.
Thank you. 3 to Mrs. Wainwright Van Kessel. I know that you provide us with an annual investment report, but is it possible, and perhaps other members of council will find this of value, to provide, say, perhaps over the last 5 or 6 years, maybe we take out the COVID years and find some sort of normalization, just to see historically what the trend is in terms of our yield results on long-term investments, so that council can have perhaps a better, information in terms of what is their comfort level in terms of, is it better to pay down or to continue to refinance based on what has been the historical trends in our return on investments from a long term as opposed to short term.
Mayor Venkos.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we can pull that information. The challenge is the information historically is not going to be as comparable because now that we've joined the Joint Investment Board, we have the potential to earn higher returns, right?
Absolutely. And I
So-
think that's the asterisk that goes there. The disclaimer is that the reason we moved in this direction is because we anticipate higher returns. And I'm sure everybody on council or myself specifically will certainly take that into consideration just so that we can be, when it comes to council at the end of the month, make a more informed decision. Thanks. That's it.
Any other comments, questions? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. 13.1 Windrow program eligibility criteria. Councillor Gardner, you pulled this one. Would you like to move it?
Mayor, I'd like to move this.
Thank you. Seconder. Councillor Weese, thank you. Councillor Gardner, go ahead.
I guess the basic thing is that I think this is fair. I know that residents, excuse me, residents won't like it, but this program costs a lot of money to the taxpayer. And I think $200 for the season is fair. And if anybody does have a problem of being able to pay this money, there is a process to follow for relief from paying this. So, you know, I would like it to be zero, but I think it's financially prudent to charge something for cost recovery. So at the moment, before I hear what council says, I think $200 is fair.
Thank you. Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. I thought $200 was really high, so I guess I have a different opinion. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Camp. I understand in the report it does speak to people with certain income brackets can opt for support, and I just don't understand what that translates to. And what I mean by that is, for instance, if the province or the federal government's giving a grant for tax purposes or for whatever it is to an individual based on their socioeconomic situation, often that's times to where that low income is so low that whether you're middle low or middle class, everybody makes too much money, can't qualify for anything. So what does that actually mean? Because I look at this $200 and that could mean you make $26,000 a year and you are scraping by and you cannot afford that 200. But if you're making 24,000, you qualify. And excuse me if I'm wrong, but you're making 26 grand a year. That's not a lot either. So I don't understand what that threshold means or how that even translates to, say, an older couple that's retired and what their old age security and their income is. I don't know what their situation is. When they make a certain income, maybe they have a mortgage you and I don't know about. And so if you could just translate, that would be great, because I'm just not convinced that $200 is fair. I think we should start lower. And if we feel we need to raise it, we raise it. Maybe we go 1,000, not 1,500, start at 100. And if we have to raise it, go from there. But I don't want to be excluding people or deterring people from utilizing it based on cost. So perhaps you could shed some light on that.
Steenkamp.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the 200 was just a cross section. We looked at other municipalities and what they were charging. Certainly, it's easier to decrease than increase when you do implement a cost for a program. So that was kind of some of the staff's rationale around starting at the 200 mark. Certainly, council can change that amount, and if you feel it needs to be lower, you'd like to see it lower, we can certainly implement whatever is recommended.
Councillor.
Thank you. I guess my question is understanding how the criteria is translated to in terms of the income thresholds that you can apply to have it subsidized. I'm just not understanding how that actually translates to the type of individuals that are going to be asking for this on an income with old age security. I don't know what that means. I know in Clarington, they charge $100. So I know you gave us some examples of municipalities, but there are other municipalities that only charge $100 or 75 or 125, but I didn't see a lot of those examples. And, you know, for me, I know when my parents, when they went through a situation where they're both medically incapable, that $100 to them, and by all means, they're not in an uncomfortable financial situation, but it's them like pinching their pennies. I thought, whoa, that's too much for that. So this 200 just a little bit, to me, sounds high. So if you could translate what that criteria is, help me understand, because I'm just not convinced.
Steenkamp.
So through you, Mr. Mayor. So we had to find some sort of threshold that quantified what low income was. So we're using the government's interpretation of what low income would qualify as. Otherwise, it's very subjective as to where we would start, what level would be fair to Aurora versus another municipality. So we feel that using the government's definition of low income is the way that we should be defining it, because it's transparent and it's fair across the board. And as I said previously, it's up to council's discretion where you want to set the level that the cost recovery would be at to implement the program.
Councillor.
Thank you. And what is that number?
Steenkamp.
Currently, for example, one person in a household would be $24,347. Two persons in a household would be $29,632.
Councillor.
Thank you. And that's very low. And considering the inflation and circumstances and so forth, I would suggest anybody making 30,000 probably would need subsidy on this too. So I think that's my point. I personally would not want to see this over at least $100. I think 200 is way too much at the starting point, and we're just worried about covering some costs because we know it is an expensive service. That's kind of where I would start. And if we needed to increase there just to offset cost, I think it's a little easier to make a subtle increase over time, just like we do any user fee. But I would start a lot lower and go from there and report back in a year and see how that works after 1 year of this payment option. That's kind of my thought.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Weese.
Yes, thank you. Mine goes back to the verification. I've had a number of residents that come to me, and I think I brought it up in the last time here, where there have been cases where the older couple over 65 and or with disabilities also had someone in the house that was able-bodied, whatever that term means. And are we doing anything different in terms of verification of that type of thing this time around, realizing this is only the second time and we're learning through it? Can you tell me a little bit of that through you, Mayor?
Steenkamp.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we are, this time around, we're asking for disclosure of everybody that's able-bodied within the house and over 16 years of age. So they have to provide proof of occupancy within the residence, and when they apply, they need to provide us with some sort of identification with their age and whether it does sign a disclosure whether they're able-bodied or not.
Great, thank you. And the other thing is with respect to what Councillor Gilliland was saying, we've done work with the All Kids Can Play program and others in town, and the low income thresholds are very low. And it's a difficult thing for anybody who's making that kind of money to come out of their pocket. But realize, again, a year ago, 2 years ago, we had nothing. And so now we're offering something. And I don't know what the number is, but there's going to be a sweet spot here. And I'm okay if it goes down or whether it stays the same. It doesn't matter to me, because I think it's important for us to subsidize as opposed to give this out. And certainly it shouldn't go to every person like it does in other municipalities. So I'm okay with reducing it. But I'd like to have some reason for reducing it because there are also a lot of people out here who are genuinely, they're over 65 years of 65 years of age, but they could afford it. They could do this themselves. And so I think we haven't found that sweet spot quite yet.
Councillor Gallup.
Thank you. I'm not sure what that amount is. My question is related to the total cost amount. If you'll recall, when this first came to us, I had raised the question of the cost of the program, and that there was, at least at that time, I believe 1 or 2 employees that were incorporated within that cost that aren't necessarily related to Windrow. And I just wanted confirmation through you, Mr. Mayor, whether or not those employees are still part of the overall cost of this program.
Steenkamp.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the cost for the program represents 6 seasonal employees that would take to implement it. Should we have upwards of 1,400 applicants? So that's the amount of staff that would be required to fulfill the duties. At the end of the day, 100% of their time will not be spent on Windrows because, as you can appreciate, it doesn't snow. And so those other tasks are accounted for in other parts of the operation.
Councillor.
So the entire program is done in-house through you, Mr. Mayor.
Steenkamp.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
And have we explored, because I seem to remember last time we didn't have a lot of time to go out and do any bids to the community to see whether or not it was more economical to have a contractor do it. Did we explore that?
Steenkamp.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we did. In the previous report, we speak to the contractor costs versus in-house costs, and it was significantly more for the contractor to perform the service. We actually went out to a formal expression of interest to find out what the costs could be.
Councillor.
This was done in the last report. Was there a timing issue that we didn't have a lot of time to do a thorough
Ms. Steenkamp.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So there's been numerous reports on this. The one that we presented, I want to say it was July, potentially. It was the one that included the costing that we'd gone out for an expression of interest to see from vendors what their costs would be. The report previous to that was the one where we had a shorter period of time to explore that cost.
Councillor.
Okay, and now that we've had 1 year under our belt and not a big snowfall last winter, do we kind of know, do we have a sense of how much of that $200,000 was spent directly on Windrow versus other tasks that those 6 employees had?
Ms. Steenkamp.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that was in the previous report as well. I believe it was upwards of 50 to 60,000 was actually on Windrows.
Councillor.
Okay. Well, I'll leave it with the people who do budgets to figure out whether that's the best way to capture those kinds of employees and the work that they do. We're trying to figure out a cost recovery program with over $120,000, which is not necessarily related to, at least in the previous season, not related to Windrow. It just doesn't feel right to me. I don't believe we're doing this correctly. If these employees are doing something else, I'm not saying we don't have them, we should capture it in a different budget versus trying to figure out a cost recovery for something that's somewhat artificial.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Through you to Ms. Steenkamp. Sarah, in terms of, calculating the program costs and the number of participating households, I look back at the survey results we did, and the survey results we did based on the pilot program indicated that only 65% of the participating groups were willing to pay a price for the service, and we had indicated between $75 and $150. And then further, we said, what was the maximum amount? And so I guess I'm a little concerned with our assumptions that we're going to have between 1,000 and 1,500 households, more than what we had or on par with what we had last year. And given the survey results, which kind of show contrary to that, that there's going to be a drop off in the numbers. So I guess while you were modeling this, were you taking into consideration the feedback from the survey results that indicated that very few actually would be willing to pay more than $150 for the service in determining the 200? I get it from a cost recovery perspective, and I think that is part of the decision that council has to make in terms of what the right amount is. But I just wonder if we're reaching too far and we're going to see a significant drop off, which then leads us to a significant shortfall in the cost recovery perspective.
Steenkamp?
So through you, Mr. Mayor. So we did consider that. This is, those numbers are kind of worst case scenario, assuming that everybody participated and we had more buy-in, because there was an expression of interest from the public that we knew that there were other people that had not participated in the program that were very interested in pursuing it in another year. That being said, we're not bound to hiring 6 staff to facilitate the program. So if we will know soon enough, based on enrollment, whether we needed the full complement of 6 to provide it, or whether we need to scale back and only have 3 staff to provide the program.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Councillor Gilliland, second time.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Thompson, for bringing up the survey results. I recall that as well. And I think that's some of the conversation we had. And I remember talking about the $7,500 mark then. So with that, I just think that the possible reduction in participation and also the income threshold, for me, I'd rather see it at $100, which is that median from that survey between 75 and 150 as a starting point. So I would like to see an amendment made that the cost recovery amount of $100 start from there and then work our way up and see how that is, report back after a year. And then maybe we need to have a different discussion, or maybe that's successful. That would be the amendment that I'd want to make.
Seconder? Councillor Garner? Any comments to the amendment? Councillor Garner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Speaking to Ms. Steenkamp's comment that it's easier to lower a price than to raise it, I would like to make sure that we call this a pilot project.
Steenkamp?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you, council had previously endorsed the continuation of the pilot project for 24-25.
Mr. Mayor, through you, thank you. And because I think it will be easier if, we don't set the expectation that we're doing this every year. If it's very clear that this is the second year of a pilot project, that may not go forward. Thank you.
Any other comments to the amendment? Does everyone know what the amendment? There it is. I'll call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Back to the main motion as amended. Are there any other comments? Councillor Gilliland, you still have the floor. Good? Okay. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Gallo, second time.
Just as a comment on just looking up the previous report, and there's a table there with the different options, and the asterisk says assuming a $100 cost recovery rate is based on the scenarios there. So at least at that point, it was anticipated for $100 cost recovery rate.
Any other comments, questions? Call vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. 13.2, leash-free areas in Aurora. Councillor Gardner, you pulled this one. Would you like to move it?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I certainly would.
Seconder? Councillor Gilliland, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is not a park. These are not parks. These are dog runs. So it says leash-free areas, but they're basically dog runs where you can let your dog off leash and they run and, you know, get rid of their energy, and that's that. And then you continue on your walk. And I did the walk with Ms. Camp, and these two areas are almost perfectly suited for this kind of a program because there are very few residents that would possibly be bothered. And it would be very easy just to plant some trees and screen the dog runs. And I think we were going to speak to there's only, I think, 4 or 5 homes that directly back onto this, and they're not at all close. So yes, I think an area like this was planned for this park, and as it says in the report, it was rejected by the adjoining residents because it was right basically in their backyard. So this is as I said, almost ideal, and I doubt that we'll have much pushback from it. And as we know, there just seem to be more and more dogs, and when you don't have an opportunity to have them off leash, it's very hard. I've had the experience, and just with 2 little dogs, there's just so much energy. So I thank Ms. Camp, and I would also like to ask her, when would it be appropriate to ask for an area to be included in this list?
Steenkamp.
I have a further suggestion.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly, this is just a living document. That list can be revised, added to, decreased, depending on the locations that are potentially suggested. And it's just a matter of us weighing against the criteria that we've provided to council. And if it fits the bill, then certainly we can look at including it on the list for future.
So should I say the location? Should I send you an email? How would be best to handle this?
Steenkamp.
For you, Mr. Mayor, certainly you can just provide us the location and we'll weigh it against the criteria.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. Refreshing. Finally, I'm a little excited that we're actually going to have somewhere for our dogs to run and play and expend some energy. And I was very grateful that you highlighted the fact that there has been a really large increase in dog ownership, especially through the COVID and pandemic. And that's definitely true. So I'm really in support of moving forward with the leash-free areas. I also am interested if we are going to be looking more on the northwest side as well. I know this is servicing a little bit of the south and it's a little in the mid, but your long-term goals were even further south. You and I did have some conversations preliminary about some potential areas, but it wasn't identified in this list. And I'm just curious as to whether or not that's still on the table. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Steenkamp.
Steenkamp.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly since our discussion and our conversation, staff did do a site walk of that specific area. The terrain is a little too encumbersome. There's a very tight pinch point in that piece of property that would prohibit us currently without the acquisition of maybe some private property to widen it out. There's a creek that runs there, and it's impossible for us to go to the other side of the creek just because of the steep incline. So that one specifically, we've kind of ruled out. Certainly on the other side, towards Elizabeth Hayter, there's an interest there as well. And that is potentially one that Councillor Gardner is speaking of that she wanted to put on the table with us.
Okay, thank you. That is the property of interest that I believe that you had a conversation about. And I felt that could be potentially a good neighborhood dog leash area or off leash area. And I also like the fact that you really delineated the types of dog parks So one being drive to, one being neighborhood. And I think it's really important because often we'll have these conversations about parking or accessibility and so forth. And while I think those are also important, I think it's also important to have neighborhood areas or parks for people to walk to, just much like a local park versus a community park. And I just don't want those to be forgotten. I don't think people want to be getting in their car to walk the dog 4 times a week. We're trying to encourage people to walk in their own neighborhoods. And the more areas we have for pet owners and their dogs to run off leash in a safe area, I think is the better. So I think this is a step in the right direction. Any ideas of when perhaps we might be able to look at that property by Thompson? Through Mr. Mayor to Ms. Camp.
Ms. Steenkamp?
I think first off, we just need to evaluate it against the criteria and make sure that it ticks the boxes and that we're comfortable and that council would be comfortable justifying it at the end of the day, should it be a selected location. And then based on that, then we can work towards a timeline.
Councillor?
Perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Weese?
Thank you. I'm in favor of these locations and the dog parks. One thing that has come to my attention, though, a number of times through residents is a code of conduct for both dog owners and stable dogs. And I know sometimes it gets blown up on social media, but I'm asking you now what's the incident of complaints that you have about unstable dogs and perhaps unstable owners?
Councillor, I'll allow an answer on this, but we're straying a little bit into a different area. This is specifically about looking at creating
the area.
leash-free, not about the policy of code of conduct of a leash-free dog park. Ms. Steenkamp?
So first off, we do have a code of conduct for canine commons currently.
Right.
So I would believe that we would put similar code of conduct just on signage at the entrances to these areas as well.
Councillor?
And just to follow up, the enforcement of that is through bylaws and it's complaint driven.
Ms. Steenkamp?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, largely it is complaint driven and bylaw is, but it does follow up on those complaints. But on the flip side of that, bylaw is out in the parks and are fairly proactive in just speaking to residents and noting when there are violations for off leash or poop and scoop, etc.
Well, my comment is the best time to do that is at the beginning of something. And so I'm just hoping that we'll have those code of conducts and there'll be some supervision bylaw. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. 14.1, new registration bylaw for additional residential units, single family dwelling units. Councillor Gardner, you pulled this one. Would you like to move it? Someone like to move this? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Gilliland. Councillor Gardner, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would like to, I know that Councillor Weese is bringing forward a motion shortly, and I would like to defer this until after that motion. I'd like to see something more in line with what the City of Toronto has put together. We know that the licensing second suites has been very problematic. Certainly, Mr. Jean and I have had many conversations about that. It's really hard to get people to register their second units. And it basically is a safety issue because if they're not inspected, we don't know if they're safe. And if they don't get registered, we don't inspect them. So before we add a third unit to this mix, I know we need to change the bylaw in order to accommodate that. But I would like to see what Councillor Weese has come up with, and that's what I have to say for now.
Councillor, which motion are you speaking about?
Am I speaking to the wrong motion again?
I only see a motion from Councillor Weese in regards to whistle cessation. I don't
Oh,
know
yeah,
what has
no,
to do with
no.
single unit
No, this is perhaps Councillor Weese can, he's been doing some work on this.
I get it, but I have no motion in front of me.
All right. I just
So
wanted
you want
to
me to defer it to
this
when?
to,
I have a mover and a seconder and it's on the floor. So if you want it, put a deferral, I'll ask for a seconder, but to defer it to when?
after Councillor Weese presents his motion.
But I mean, we have.
I do not
I
know
have-
when
I have
that
no
is.
motion being submitted as of yet.
May I, through you, Mr. Mayor, may I ask Councillor Weese to tell us when his motion might be coming forward?
Councillor Weese? It's up to you if you want to answer it, because you haven't spoken yet, but
I've had some discussions with the clerk about this. I've had discussions with Central York Fire. I think it's going to be an extension of what's here. And if I may, I better not, if you'll do, am I up now? Is this my chance or?
I mean, because Councillor still has the floor, so I'm just allowing you to answer that you have something coming, I guess.
It's coming, yes. I
Do you know
assume it
when?
will be. I'm hoping to get it in October, so.
Okay, Councillor? Back to you.
To defer this report until after Councillor Weese's motion comes forward in October.
So in November. Defer it to the November cycle.
Okay, I'll refer it to the November cycle.
Is there a seconder to defer it?
If I still have the floor, I would like to say that Mr. Jean's bylaw is pretty much the same as the bylaw that we have now, but with some accommodation for the third suite. And I've been working with illegal secondary suites for years now, and we need to figure out how to make these second suites legal, because it's a safety issue. So before we add a third, I know the province allows it, but before we add a third to a new bylaw, I would like to know the information that Councillor Weese has been researching, from what I understand, for a while. And I would like to know if, I mean, we could just pass this as it is and then, you know, change it after Councillor Weese comes forward. But I think it's just more appropriate. And I'm sorry that Mr. Jean wasn't in the loop. But I would ask councils, whatever, to defer this.
Council still want to do the deferral?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a seconder? To deferring it, but not to the actual motion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Got a seconder. So now we are just, any comments or questions to the deferral? Councillor Gallo.
My only question is, and I don't even know if Councillor Weese can answer this, but to what degree does he believe that this policy will change as a result of what he's proposing to bring forward?
Councillor Weese.
Wasn't really prepared to defend the motion yet, because it's still not on the floor yet. However, I can tell you that the problem that I have with this, and I appreciate the work that Mr. Jean has done and what Councillor Gartner has done in the past, but my biggest problem with this has to do with pages 3 and 4 under legal considerations, and that it talks about the need for enforcement, as Councillor Gartner said, is one of the biggest problems with this particular bylaw. And then it said that we wanted to have enforcement powers, but it says, however, it should be noted that it will not allow entry into buildings or dwellings unless consent is provided by an occupant, which limits the town's enforcement capabilities. So in my view, if you are creating a policy or creating a rule that is unenforceable, then it's really not much good to us. And so my direction is to look at something that has some enforcement powers to it. So that's the direction that I will be taking with the motion next month. Through you to Councillor Gallo.
Councillor Gallo?
Thank you. Thank you for that on the spot. And it sounds like this could be revised in a significant way, in a positive way, where we can accomplish, I guess, entry, whereas this isn't allowing that. So I have no issues, unless there's some urgency with passing this now, to wait and to hear what comes out of that resolution and hopefully put it all together.
Councillor Thompson, to the deferral.
Thank you. That was my same question. So through you to Mrs. Desario, in the legal consideration section, first line, you indicate that the town's current registration bylaw needs to be amended and updated given the legislative changes. Can this wait a couple months and deal with it in November?
Mr. Desario?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It potentially can, but from my perspective, in terms of the enforcement, even if we wait until November, it will be the same. So we do not have authority to enter into people's homes. It's very difficult to do so. We did have for bylaw a standard operating procedure that we did a couple of years back.
Yes.
At the time, we did say that one way to enter into the property would be more through a search warrant, because the legislation does not give us authority to enter into people's homes. So while it could wait till November, it might be the same answer.
But just to clarify, I'm not speaking to the enforcement powers, but just in terms of aligning this, our bylaw with the provincial legislation that passed and the as of rights. And so you had indicated that we needed to update it to be in alignment. Can that wait a couple months while we circle through Councillor Weese's motion?
Mr. Desario?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, sorry about that. Yes, it can.
Councillor?
That's it.
Councillor Gilliland, to deferral.
Thank you. I guess I'm just a little confused about this, if I may. And I know I've had some offline conversations that are very preliminary in regards to a motion that none of us had seen. But I guess, in my opinion, there was a motion that I did write, and it was approved by council back in December of 2022 that specifically addressed collaboration within Central York Fire Services in respect to safety inspections. I wish that Mr. Alex Ray was available to speak to this, because I had several conversations with him about it, as well as Ms. Van Leeuwen. And I also spoke with the late Chief Lang about this, as well as Deputy Inglis. He's unfortunately no longer with Central York Fire. So I haven't had the time to circle up with the acting deputies who are in charge of this collaboration. So if that is what we're asking for, that type of in-depth look about the inspections for safety, that's exactly what was the whole point in this motion, of report back with the feasibility of implementing a residential rental units and licensing system for the fact that they have safety measures in place. So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Desario, obviously this occurred when Ms. Van Leeuwen was the director at the time. Do you have any status or update based on that part of the motion that was directed by council and approved by council to collaborate with Central York Fire Services about the inspections? Because that was supposed to be one way to order to enter into a home to ensure that these rental units are in fact safe.
Mr. Desario?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can find out that information for you.
Okay, thank you.
Sir.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's all. I'm just, we're just all talking on hypotheticals here. And to Mr. Serio's point, whether we're deferring this now or passing this tonight, I'm not so sure it's going to make a big difference on the overall outcome. If there's an addition to the motion that Councillor Weese wants to present, I personally don't think it's going to reflect or affect so much what's on the floor for us today with this report.
I just got one question before I go to Councillor Gardner. Mr. Romano, as of today, regardless of whether we pass this or not, or we defer it or not, can someone get an additional residential unit?
To yes, Mr. Mayor, yes, and we have seen applications, building permits for the third additional units on properties in town.
So essentially, we just won't have an updated bylaw when it comes to this. That's all. But the legislation allows for it regardless of what we do.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gardner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And further to Councillor Thompson's comment, the province passed the right of a third suite about 2.5 years ago. So I don't think it's going to hurt to delay by a couple of months. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Call a vote on the deferral. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. 14.2 updates the street naming policy. Councillor Gardner, you pulled this one. Would you like to move it? Oh, yeah. Can we just finish this one since I already started? All right. Would you like, well, actually, I haven't got a mover yet. We can take a recess. You want me to get the motion first and then call the recess? Go for it all? Okay. Councillor Gardner, did you want to move this? Do you guys want a recess? Do you want a recess? All right, I'm gonna call for a recess. All right, council, we're back. So updates, street naming policy. Did someone want to move that? Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Kim. Comments or questions? Councillor Gardner pulled it, but you have any comments or questions to updated street naming policy? Councillor Gallo, go ahead.
Just go before Councillor Gardner gets some. I'm sure she has some questions. Is there any way of getting, and maybe we've had it in the past and I've missed it, I'm not sure, through you to Mr. Ramuno, a full list, a full document with the list of everyone who's on that list?
On the bank of street names?
Yeah.
Mr. Ramuno?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that's available. We'll certainly, we can send a copy of that out to all members of council.
Councillor?
And even when it changes or when we add someone, because obviously we recently had some discussion about the list and whether or not some of the people that were on the cenotaph are on it, and that whole discussion, and just to confirm that we've gone through that exercise and that we've captured those names.
Mr. Ramuno? See head nodding.
We can
yes.
certainly do that. Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, we have, we keep the bank of approved street name list up to date when we add names onto it, and we'll, tomorrow we'll circulate copies out to all members of council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Street name policy. Councillor Gardner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We transferred a lot of powers to staff. And one of them was the street naming policy. I would like that to be taken out of this policy because I believe that it's council, not staff, who should decide about what the street names are in our town. So I would make that motion that the delegated authority to name streets be rescinded and that the approval rests with council.
Seconder. I don't see a seconder, Councillor.
Okay, that's fine, Mr. Mayor. I should have prepared a better speech. Really, the question I just want to leave everybody with for next time is, do we really want the names of our streets to be decided by somebody who doesn't live in the town, who is staff and therefore for arm's length, or do we want it to rest with the people who are elected to represent the people?
Okay, any other comments or questions? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Okay, next we have Councillor Weese, your motion regarding review of train whistle cessation at all level crossings in the town of Aurora, which I'm assuming you'd like to move your motion as is. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Gallo? Yeah. Sir. Councillor Gallo? Yeah. Councillor Weese, go ahead. The floor is yours. Thanks.
I'll be happy to put the motion forward again for council, and I hope we'll get approval. But if there's other issues that need to come up, then I'd be happy to work on those. As you can see from the motion, this is about updating our train horn cessation file that was presented back in 2018 through Councillor Gilliland. And after a considerable amount of work by her and the town staff, the process of the town stopping the horns, the motion was defeated because at the time, I believe this was about assumption of risk and resultant liability should a tragic event occur. And I bring this forward because of the chair of the Metrolinx Community Construction Committee. It's made up of a number of residents and groups that are close to the track that are impacted by the construction. We're anticipating two-way 15-minute service. And so that's going to increase the train traffic by tenfold and increase the impact of the horns on those people who are impacted by it. I've spoken to staff about changes in the process, and there are some processes that may have changed with respect to the Transport Canada and the safety of the level crossings. And there are about 2,500 units, I estimate, that are within 400 meters of the train tracks that go all the way from the south end to the north end of the town. And this bifurcates the town. And the hope with this motion is that we are going to update the information that council needs to make an informed decision about the train horns and do it in anticipation of the double track construction and the increased traffic along the trains. So it's really about staff revisiting the work that's previously done, asking for the report to come back so that we can have a fulsome discussion about the future of the train. And I also think it's important for us to do this work now because I believe that there's going to be some decisions being made very soon, so that within a couple of years, the project may be finished, if you can believe what the Metrolinx people say about finishing their work. So basically, I'm hoping for a staff report to come back and that it will update us all about safety. But most importantly, I think we need to focus on the safety of all of our train tracks. I know there's some upgrades that have been done by the region at St. John's. I know that there's been some things done at Englehart, but I'm not exactly sure what they are. But I don't think there's any reason why all of our train tracks shouldn't be up to federal safety standards. And that if it's a budgetary item, I'd rather get started on it now and have it spread over a couple of years rather than be faced with it at one time in 2 years from now. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thank Councillor Weese for bringing this forward. And as far as I was concerned, this issue was decided in 2014 in Mayor Morris's council. We were all ready to go. And then in our last council, we had discussions on this, and I thought we had decided what we were going to do. So let's do it. Again, thanks to Councillor Weeks for not letting this fall through the cracks. And for my estimate, it means that every 7.5 minutes, a train will be passing an intersection. It's going to be unbearable for the people who live close to the railway tracks. And for those that say they shouldn't have bought a place there, I mean, who had any idea that we were going to have this kind of train traffic? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gallo.
Thank you. I'm in support of this. I just was wondering whether or not to put a timeline to it, if Councillor Weese has put any thought towards, or staff, in terms of producing this report. Is there any value in putting a timeline to it?
Councillor Weese.
Tag on. There we go. The reason that I think it should be done now is because there's a lot of interest that's going on in the community, and particularly in all of Ward 1, where it's really an important job for them. And I think they'd like to see some discussion on it. And I also think it's going to take a bit of time for people to realize the the requirements. So for instance, we have Englehart, which is going to be a level crossing that has to be managed. We have what may or may not happen at Center Street based upon what may or may not happen with respect to the grade separation that's been proposed. I've been told by Metrolinx that they will have an answer to that question before the end of the year. But that will come to council first, and then it will be public after that. So I think the timing is about right now to get started on it, particularly if we're going to put it into a budget that says that we have to do the level crossing upgrades at Englehart, for example, and decisions around traffic management around Center Street. So it's not as simple as as a slam dunk that here's what we need to do, let's just do it. I think it's going to take some time to get this done correctly.
I mean, my only perspective is perhaps we shouldn't leave it open-ended. Now isn't necessarily a timeline for staff, before the end of the year in the spring. I think we should probably give them some indication on when we'd expect this. We're just really reporting back on the process needed to create a bylaw.
One sec, Councillor. Mr. Serio, when would this fall under you? No, sorry. Mr. Muno, when do you anticipate bringing a report back?
I think we can have one back before the end of the year.
For the end of the year.
There you go. Thank you.
Sorry. Is that solve? Okay, perfect. Okay, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I support the motion and the idea of bringing a report back. I mean, we've had these conversations as indicated in the past. I would just ask that the report expands beyond just the process. I mean, it's always come down to questions of the quality of life versus liability versus safety. And so I think that, those components should be within that report so that council, to your point, makes a well-informed decision in what they feel is the best way forward. I know that, a lot of the work's probably already been done when it comes to liability because it's been in previous reports. So it shouldn't be too onerous of a task to add that to the report that's coming back to staff, to us. But I would also, I'd like to make mention of the fact that when I've looked at reports from other municipalities, Halton Hills and Innisfil, they've made references to studies that's been done in the past at crossings where there's a whistle ban or a whistle cessation and a cessation, and that, based on these studies, there's a higher rate of accidents, significantly higher than in regular ones. And I haven't had access to these studies. I don't know if we're comparing apples to apples or how relevant it is. Some of them aren't dated, but I would ask staff to look into the data and perhaps even the mayor with the region to see if there are any statistics, any data that shows, is there any validity in these claims from these other reports that there's a higher rate of accidents at these crossings that have whistle cessation, because I think that's an important factor for all of us to give into consideration when we make a final decision on this one way or another. So, I support the motion. I support the idea of a report coming back and us making a final decision. I would just ask that, there's further information around the liability and safety, so that we understand the risks.
See, Mr. Ramona's nodding his head yes. You'll do that. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. We've certainly seen a lot of things come and go in relation to the GO train over the last few terms, actually. So it'll be interesting to see what bylaw can come back with. Just curious, I guess through you, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Mayor, in relation to St. John Side Road, is that something that the region would need to take under their helm to come back with us, or is this something that bylaw is going to have to take on as well?
I did speak to the chairman today. Initially, when we passed the motion for St. John's to be done by the region to support the region to move forward with the added secure safety features, it was put forward. But then there was a review done by Metrolinx on all their crossings. And then they've moved forward with doing installations of safety features for pedestrians at essentially all our crossings. So that didn't get done by the region. It got done by Metrolinx. We do possibly have a report coming back, but I'm waiting to hear from the chairman. So by council, I should have some more information for all of us in regards to the St. John's crossing.
Perfect. Thank you. I thought I recollected something to that effect with the region and
the region has not approved
and Metrolinx
with the whistle cessation at St. John's as of yet.
Right, but the safety measures and the investment in that has been taken care
done
of
by Metrolinx.
Right. Okay. I knew there was something and I couldn't remember what that was.
Yeah.
And just for clarity, and I don't know if this is set in stone because I don't think anything is with Metrolinx, is the idea, the thought from what I gather from the last time we had this discussion that Center Street would eventually potentially be closed and then the underpass for Wellington would be go under and then perhaps maybe that would alleviate that issue for Center Street and Wellington. And maybe you can't speak to that. I don't know, but it seems to always change, but I just kind of wanted to know if you had heard anything different.
Lots of conversations, lots of rumors, lots of suggestions. At this point, there's nothing firm. I think to myself, to the region, or to any of us, or even our staff, as far as what will happen with some of our crossings, if and when, as Councillor Weese mentioned, if they actually do move forward with that grade separation, we will find out soon enough.
Right, right. And Englehart would be, I think we determined that would be under our jurisdiction for the safety costs of that because it doesn't fall on a regional road, correct? Or are they actually going to be paying for that as well?
Metrolinx has already done some minor improvements.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, second.
Just quickly following up on the St. John's and the region. Do you know if the region has entered into an indemnity agreement with Metrolinx or where that stands?
No, they have not approved the whistle cessation, so they have not entered into any agreement with Metrolinx at this point in time. As I said, that got deferred until Metrolinx did their review and decided on what they were going to do. Metrolinx has made where they're going to move forward and do the safety features at the crossing. So therefore, the region did not have to pay for it. And so we were on hold until that came back. Now that that's back, we will have something coming back to regional council. But as I said, I'll have more information on that when I speak to regional staff before council. Councillor Weese, second time.
Yeah, just finally, with respect to what Councillor Gilliland stated, Metrolinx is, as part of their grade separation, should there be one, has committed to a traffic study. And so that traffic study that they will provide will come to us first, and then it has to be approved by us. So in there will be what happens to Center Street and all level crossings anyway. So they're committed to doing that traffic study and bringing it to this council.
At the end of the day, yes, it will be this council that decides if something was to happen to Center Street.
Right.
Any other comments or questions? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. New business. Councillor Kemp, start on your side. New business.
Mayor, I just want to congratulate Mayor Maracas for getting on the board of directors of AMO. And
not new business, but thank you.
Okay. So did you say PSAs?
I said new business, but,
okay.
Go ahead, finish. You already started.
So just wanted to congratulate you. And I know that there's a lot of preparations involved in the election process, and I'm sure you'll represent York Region well.
Thank you. Any new business? No. Councillor Gallo, new business.
I just was hoping to deal with the delegate that came at the beginning of the meeting, and perhaps ask staff. Well, first off, to see if there's any suggestions based on what the delegate had brought forward and how we can move forward or do something to fix the problem that we tried to fix.
Mr.
To you, Mr. Mayor. So I guess when we dealt with the matter back in the spring sometime a few months ago, staff's council's direction staff was to install the stop sign. That's been done. But the other direction that was that staff also install the the flexible traffic bollards along Tamarac. We haven't done that yet. We're looking to do that this fall, September, early October. So that's the last component. If council wants to direct staff to, revisit the placement of the stop sign, it's something we can do, but it was installed in the location as identified in that report back in the spring. But council also did direct us to install the flexible safety traffic bollards, and we're working on that.
Council.
Is there any way of directing staff to send someone out there and monitor the situation? Because based on the videos, that's not cool what's happening right now based on what we did, and have report back to council on, did we make a mistake? And if so, how do we remedy that? I think we should have someone spend some time there, sit there and see exactly what's happening at that intersection.
Mr. Romano, do you need direction from council right now, or can we send someone out there to monitor and then come back and report back to council? Councillor, should we report back at council, or should we? Because I'd say the
As soon as we can.
Okay.
We can certainly do that.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we can have it as an added item. Mr. Romano? Okay.
And I don't know if anyone else had any of the suggestions, but I think that's a good course of action.
Okay. Councillor Thompson, new business? Councillor Gardner, new business?
This would be a question, I believe, through you to Mr. Muno. Mr. Muno, we used to have, at least for the stable neighborhoods, in the last term of council, we used to get a list of the construction permits for the area. And I'm wondering if we can continue that process.
Mr. Romano?
Through Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, just to clarify, are you looking for the new building permits or additions within stable neighborhoods?
Yes, and I believe we did have it at one time. And I'm wondering through Mr. Mayor, if you have any suggestions. I know that there has to be a permit issued and it has to be displayed, but sometimes this comes as a complete surprise to the surrounding neighbors. Is it possible can you think of anything that we could do so that the neighborhood is not just taken by surprise? Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, a couple months ago when our CBO, Bill Jean, brought forward the construction policy in stable neighborhoods, one of the protocols was that we would require the applicant homeowner to install a building permit sign just as notice. Again, it was really for any major renovations or redevelopment on site. So that's been approved by council, and moving forward, that's a requirement.
Councilor?
Thank you. That's going to save me a lot of very surprised and annoyed calls. Thank you.
Councillor Gillian, new business? No. Councillor Weese, new business?
And it's basically, I think back in June, I asked Mr. Ramuno about the same thing having to do with the townwide community school safety zones. And I'm wondering if we are any closer, or when that report is going to come back to council. Through you to Mr. Ramuno.
Mr. Ramuno?
Mr. Mayor, that's coming forward in October.
Thank you.
Councillor?
And within that, is there going to be some discussion about the speed cameras and where they're going to be used and implemented, if at all?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, I think that's the essence of the report, is to identify the community safety zones and the automated cameras.
Councillor?
And I want to thank whoever, maybe you, maybe Sarah, Mr. Teenkamp, about the slow down signs that are on the pavement out in front of Tim Hortons and St. Maximilian Kolb. It's been noticed, and I hope it's being effective. So it's another thing maybe you could take a look at in other and other areas of schools, because you're looking down at and you suddenly get a slapped with that. It's very important. So I want to thank you for that. And with respect to the delegate, I had a comment about that. If when you're doing your look, is it possible for you to take a look at other three-way stops where there are driveways opposite and see how many of those we do have in town that are working effectively, or maybe they're not there at all? I think it would be useful information for us to have when the report comes back, if you don't mind. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Public service announcements.
Well, I'm sure you're going to say something about Saturday Night Fever. It's coming up on Saturday.
Go ahead.
We don't mind saying it. Saturday Night Fever is coming up on Saturday and downtown. And I know that because of part of the BIA plus of the social media. So I want to direct everybody to that. We'd like to see a large crowd for this unique activity. Weather permitting, I hope it's going to be good.
Thank you. Councillor Gilliland, public service announcement.
Thank you. Yes, I always like to give a shout out to the Aurora Cultural Center. They actually have some great discovery days that are all free of charge. That's going on between September 21st and 28th. So I really encourage you to check it out. It's not something that they do all the time. So I think it'd be a really good opportunity to sample some of the arts and culture opportunities here right at Town Square, since this will be their first time when they're in Town Square, which is great. I'd like to highlight some of the places in Ward 2, the Royal Rose Art Gallery as well. They've got all their fall classes up and running and some excellent exhibitions. Please check that out. And as well, the National Historic Site, the Hillary House. They have a Victorian Harvest Tea coming up on September 14th and some great speakers as well. So I encourage you to check that out as well. There's some great things to do right here in Ward 2.
Councillor Gardner, public service.
Buddy. Hopefully.
Councillor Thompson, Councillor Gallo, Councillor Kim. Yeah. I just got a few. Obviously, as everyone's aware, our Town Square grand opening is just a few weeks away, taking place September 21st to October 13th. Celebration will feature a variety of indoor and outdoor entertainment, including hands-on workshop, exclusive previews from partners, and captivating performances. And the grand opening will feature unique experiences and vibrant cultural offerings, highlighting the venue's state-of-the-art design. For details and any ticket sales, they're now available at auroratownsquare.ca. Also, if you want to know more about our draft Affordable Housing Action Plan, you can join us at our open house on September 9th from 6 to 8 p.m. right here at Town Hall. And this is your chance to review the plan, chat with the project team, and share your ideas. It's important to get your feedback, as it will help shape the future of housing in our community. And you can learn more and view the draft plan at engageaurora.ca/affordable housing. Also coming up September 28th, we have our fall community cleanup. It's a great time to get out, help clean up our streets and our parks, and students can also earn their volunteer hours while making a difference, and they can register at aurora.ca/cleanup. And then join us September 21st, not only for the opening of Town Square, but also to celebrate diversity and come together as a community at Aurora's Multicultural Festival. Experience how other cultures celebrate song and dance with a fully packed entertainment lineup, plus as many community zone with fun activities for the family. And don't miss free appetizer samples at Aurora Town Square as we celebrate appetizers from around the world. And for more details on the Multicultural Festival, you can visit aurora.ca/multicultural festival. And yes, happy September. And I'd like to wish all of our students much success in the upcoming year, as well as thank parents, staff, teachers, everyone for all the work that they do to make sure that our students are successful in their endeavors. And also everyone on the roads, please take your time and be careful. With that said, can I get a motion to adjourn? Oh, Councillor Gilliland, sorry. Didn't see that.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention one more thing. So I wasn't sure if it was on your list. The Seniors Active Living Fair is this Saturday as well, and that's from 9 to 1. It's free admission, so you can go and you can check out over 50 vendors. And also, which is really interesting, is they have a try it out week from September 9 to 13. So there's a whole myriad of things that you can try out for free at the Senior Center and see if it's something that you're interested in. So I encourage you to go and check it out. Thanks.
Thank you. Motion adjourned. Councillor Thompson. Councillor Weese, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We are adjourned.